This is the Nigerian Economic Diplomacy course NED, held in Abuja to recognize the significant correlation between a nation's economic prosperity and its global standing. NED is expected to explore diverse perspectives on economic diplomacy, paving the way for collaborative solutions and meaningful engagements in fostering trade relations and sustainable growth. In attendance was the Director General, World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, who highlighted what the organization is doing to support developing countries with trade issues.
I want everyone to know that the WTO is really about people. The founding documents of the WTO in the Marrakesh Agreement says that the WTO's purpose is to enhance living standards, help create employment, and support sustainable development. Okay, and that is the essence for me of what we have to deliver, and the essence of getting countries to work together by constantly reminding them that the WTO is not just about negotiating agreements, but we have a fisheries agreement that's about delivering for people, sustainability, and for the world, a global common good. We also house the world's intellectual property agreement. And during the pandemic, this became a huge topic about whether we could have flexibilities within the agreement to allow developing countries access, because they were standing at the back of the queue for vaccines. And therefore, how do we manage this so developing countries can manufacture vaccines for themselves?
Being from a developing country, the DGWTO spoke more about solutions that transition period digital trade others will provide.
They want the others to agree to give them a transition period to still benefit from the flexibilities in WTO agreements that are there for the poorest countries. They were able this time to negotiate a 3-year transition period, along with other flexibilities, which I don't need to go into now. But I'm very proud of that. Being from a developing country is very joyful to think that after a decade we're able to get this. The third thing I'm happy about is something very arcane called the e-commerce moratorium. In simple language, it's really an agreement not to tax digital trade, not to put customs duties on electronic transmissions, which is basically part of digital trade.
Experts lend their voices to various challenges of implementation.
When it comes to the elaboration and actual implementation, I've always been struck how, and of course Europeans, we usually believe quite strongly in trade regionalism and in the potential it might also have elsewhere in the world. But very struck by how differently it panned out in East Africa and West Africa. And then also within Nigeria, we are told, and not only in the ECOWAS context, but for instance also when we are negotiating between regions, EU and West Africa, that it is that we find some resistance within Nigeria, and particularly within its private sector, even more than within its government, which I find even a bigger paradox.
I think for us as a country, there's also a need to protect our local industries as well. The reason is because yes, there's liberalization and globalization, but at the same time, there has to be, for our economic diplomacy to succeed here, there has to be a mix of the liberalization and sometimes even restriction. Because, for example, how can a rice miller in Nigeria that has been milling for 5 years compete with a Thailand miller that has been in the business for over 100 years? How can a textile company in Kaduna, for example, compete with a Chinese or Vietnam textile industry that has also been in the business for a very long time? So yes, we understand that point, but maybe when it comes to food and all of that, we need to have some kind of restrictions. But when it comes to technology, driven products, yes, we have to be liberal. But of course, the ultimate agenda, ultimate plan must also be to domesticate it, because that's where I think that we're missing out, trying to ensure that as we engage in this trade and engage in some of these, bilateral and multilateral agreements, that we also find a way to retain the to have, knowledge and technology transfer that can help our local industry grow.
Also speaking, Professor Kingsley Moghalu, chairman of the Board of Directors and Advisory Board of African Private Sector Summit, stated ways for Nigeria to benefit from economic diplomacy, taking advantage of her huge markets.
We must have an enabling business environment. For example, security, is a very big issue, and it affects economic productivity. And as we see today with agriculture, food inflation, and all those things. And so business environment is very important. And also, we need to educate our government policy officials and our private sector leaders and SME leaders on the opportunities for trade, and to focus on becoming part of the global value chain, which is now 75% of global trade. The importance of not just the business environment, but, making sure that we focus on intra-African trade a lot more.
Meanwhile, the need for a platform to promote trade and relations was discussed.
We see economic diplomacy as a key aspect of international economic relations. Nigeria, as a country, cannot operate alone. Nigeria needs bilateral and multilateral relationship with other countries. So this is a platform that enhances conversations on how, to promote trade and investment relations. How can we cooperate better as, with other countries to increase economic development, as well as, more mutually beneficial relationship with the foreign.
The Center for the Study of Economies of Africa made an edition for Nigeria Economic Diplomacy Discourse in partnership with NOI Polls and the African University of Science and Technology, hosted various head of missions and representatives of foreign missions in Nigeria, foreign policy experts, development economists, and others. The event offered valuable insights, contributing to a deeper understanding of economic dynamics and diplomatic. From the nation's capital, Mavis Ako, KAFTAN TV News.